Divorced after 16 years of marriage and single at 39, I share my mistakes and experiences to help your marriage, improve your dating life, and prepare you for life after divorce. Heather, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Good to be here.
I know. Last time you were here, what was it? A year ago? Maybe a year and a half ago? Last time we spoke?
Yeah, a little while.
Okay. Well, if you don't mind, do the folks a favor and just introduce yourself and let them know what you do, what you specialize in.
Yeah, so I have been working on helping men quit porn and sexual addiction for 4.5 years now. So I've been around a while. I wrote a book, created a community. I've worked in social media as well, but really just helping men be able to conquer themselves, conquer those urges, be able to navigate the guilt and the shame after decades of struggle, and helping them kind of rebuild.
Okay. And we're going to touch on that later, but I want to talk about what we were talking about in the chat, because for those who don't know, like we were chatting about a week ago, and we're just sharing some frustrations with coaching. And you had mentioned something a term that I had not heard of before. It was an intimacy deadlock. And that is fascinating to me. So like you were telling me that you found some of your clients are attractive guys, husbands are doing everything they can. They're engaging in the household and they're good providers. And yet there's still something going on in the bedroom. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, well, I think this can apply to even if they don't quite meet those credentials.
Yeah.
So to speak. Intimacy deadlock is just where, the wife is just saying, no, I'm just done. And a lot of times the blame is getting thrown at the guy. You did this in the past. You cheated in the past. You watched porn in the past. I don't feel connected with you because of some toxic behaviors of the past. But then they get to this point where the husband's like, well, I'm healthy now. And that's a non-issue now. And I'm trying to move forward and I'm trying to make this work. And the woman's just like endlessly not interested. Typically, there's really high expectations, or sometimes it's vice versa. Honestly, sometimes there are cases where it's the man and he's like, no, and so it's where everyone has demands. And it's not just sexual intimacy, it's also emotional intimacy. Everyone has demands that's not getting met. So typically the guy's like, well, I gave my wife a hug, she pushed me away, and then he gives up for a few days. Maybe he turns to porn, he quits. And then she's like, hey, why don't you touch me anymore? And he's like, yeah. I don't touch you anymore because last time I did, you pushed me away. And so they get into this pattern where the way that I described it to one of my clients is I was like, you and your wife are literally drowning in 2 feet of water. You both want intimacy. You both want connection again. And yet you're refusing it at awkward times and you don't know where to go from here.
How do you think they get there, though? I mean, let's say, for example, you have a gentleman who was addicted to pornography. He's made the efforts. He's totally rebuilt himself, and he's now healthy and ready to go. Like, what do you think the wife's, is it maybe possibly resentment that she's holding on to that's maybe she's pushing him away?
A lot of it's resentment, absolutely. A lot of it's kind of fear of how do we rebuild? A lot of it is honestly a lack of male leadership. And that's the biggest thing that I work with guys on is, hey, you want to get out of this hole? You're going to have to be the leader here. Not wait for your wife to put out so that you can then do all the things that you should do. That's being a follower, not a leader. So a lot of times, but yeah, resentment is a huge part of it. Sometimes I feel like most of the things that get used as excuses, we'll talk about the excuses, aging, kids, not interested in sex anymore. I have back pain, right? I honestly, I call most of those excuses because, a really happy, healthy couple with lots of intimacy also has kids, also has, jobs, work, stress, but it's more about, losing touch with the desire to connect. A lot of times it's porn that plays a huge role for a lot of people, where there's kind of this resentment. Aging women especially start feeling less attractive. And so they're feeling like, they're unwanted, which to me is crazy because I've heard women say to me, they're complaining to me about when I talk to wives, about how they feel insecure. They feel like their husband doesn't love them anymore. They feel like used or whatever. And I'll talk to the husband. He's like, my wife is literally the most beautiful woman in the world. I love her. I want to be with her. And so, I think poor communication could also be part of this, not communicating your wants. I spoke to one husband who He said that in therapy, his wife was like, he never initiates sex anymore. And he's like, I haven't been initiating because I thought you didn't want it, you know? And so it's just interesting. It's like lack of communication, lack of non-sexual intimacy, emotional and physical. And then it goes dead.
I want to go to the sexual intimacy part because again, with my clients that contact me, a lot of them are considering going through a divorce or they're in the process of one, right? And I ask them like, what went wrong? And they say it's intimacy, but also sexual intimacy as well. And I'm like, well, can you be more specific? And a lot of people have told me that they were maybe into a certain thing, or maybe when they finally had the bravery to go ahead and confess that to their spouse that they were into, let's just say feet, for example, that's a big thing, you know. And the spouse felt really disgusted and really didn't want to even participate with them with that type of thing. Now, again, you shouldn't do things you're not comfortable with doing. I totally agree with that. But why do you think, and I tell people that are about to get engaged, I go, be very open and transparent with what you're into. Like there's intimacy, but also there's sexual intimacy. Let them know what your fantasies are. Share that with you. Because I feel if you're in a relationship and you can't share a sexual fantasy that you have because you think there may be some sort of like backlash coming from the partner that you're with, I think that's not a great relationship you want to start off with. I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I made kind of a joke on TikTok recently that I thought people should get sexual prenups because I'm like, no,
sexual prenups. Okay.
Like have some ground rules for, hey, this is what we're cool with in this relationship. This is what, if you decide to go that direction, I'm not going with you. But really just the concept there is have open discussion early on. If you want, if your partner wants a monogamous relationship with, kind of a very vanilla in the bedroom relationship, but you want, you're constantly fantasizing about all these other things. Well, you should have that conversation. I had another client that, was into a very specific body part, and his wife was like, literally, do not touch me there.
Mm-hmm.
And, 15 years into marriage, he's literally losing his mind. Now, there's a lot of work that can be done to curb obsessions and fetishes. Like, that's what I do for work is I help people unlock those, figure out why it's become an obsession, be able to calm the nervous system about that fetish.
Wow.
But that being said, it needs to be an open conversation.
And I find that strange. Like people don't want to. Like they don't want to rock their boat. They don't want to they don't want to share that side with that person. Like, for example, one of my clients, they were getting divorced. I'm like, what happened? Well, my wife's bisexual. I'm like, okay. Did you not know that? She's like, no, we've been married 12 years. And she just finally told me that she's bisexual and I'm not down for that. I'm like, okay. So I just find it like, I know we're saying it, as, older folks as we are now, right? Like, hey, to have the conversation, but I'm very curious why people don't want to have that. So they keep that inside and maybe possibly live a lie for a long time. And as you said, curb a fetish. I mean, if somebody's into a certain thing, you have to tell me, like, how do you talk them like out of that? I mean, I think that's like an idea or like an obsession can grow. And before you know it, they're consumed with that idea and I have to go get it. How do you talk them out of that?
Well, the first thing to say is this is not shaming any particular fetish. You can like what you like. And the first step is, if a person comes to me, and I've had this before, where, maybe we have a session or two and they decide, hey, you know what? I actually like this part of me and I'm actually just going to pursue this thing rather than wanting to change it and work out of it. The process of working out of it, oftentimes, we might be able to pinpoint exactly where that fetish started or what value they gain from it, certain types of porn use or a lot of times fetishes do come from porn, because this is something you see and it's interesting. Otherwise, we're not as creative usually on our own. But, sometimes people are just from an early age, something triggered them. A lot of times, a lot of the people I speak to, it came from some sort of childhood experience that was their first introduction to sexuality. And so it really stuck in their brain, whether it was a video they watched or a personal experience. And whatever it was about that experience just sticks with them.
That's interesting. Yeah. Now, oh my God, let me go back to the intimacy deadlock thing. So what would you advise a couple to do Like, let's say they're in that situation where they're both just, they don't want to meet in the middle. Like, what options should they do? What should they consider? Who should take lead? You said, I know you mentioned the man should take point on that, but is there anything like, let's say the wife wants to do anything? What suggestions would you have for a couple like that?
Well, let's first talk about the fetish side, and then we'll go into the restoring the marriage side, kind of transition this way. So when it comes to fetishes, I'd say you have to have an open conversation and meet in the middle. And we won't even call it fetishes. We'll just call it sexuality in general. You have to have a conversation and you have to be willing to meet in the middle. And I think that this is my advice to couples: be willing to give. I've been in relationships where, I was on both sides of that fence. Either the party who was like, I can't go that direction with you, or the one saying, hey, I need more of this over here. And both are very painful situations at times, but compromise needs to be made if the relationship is important. And I think it oftentimes can be made. Part of that, it's really painful to accept, but that compromise is largely based on how much value you see in the person. And I think, I often recommend to people, start with something soft. Hey, I would really like this. And then you say, hey, this is really important to me. Would you, participate in this? Or would you increase our intimacy? And from there say, hey, I feel really unfulfilled in this relationship. This is something I really need. I know it's not a priority to you, but are you willing to at least make some sort of effort there? I understand that experience won't be the same for you as it is for me, but I would love for you to meet my needs in this way. And then from there, you kind of, you have to be kind and loving and gentle, but also it's okay to increase your, the seriousness of that conversation.
Okay.
And then when it comes to a marriage, this is kind of my system that I walk couples through, and even my friends through, who are in this deadlock situation. I tell them to go and on pieces of paper, it could be a note in your phone or a piece of paper, write a very, very simple list of a few basic things. The first one is your needs, your like minimum needs. And when I say minimum, I don't mean like you want them to put the toilet paper roll on a certain way. This is the bare minimum I can accept and feel satisfied in this relationship. The second one is your deal breakers. Like if you keep screaming and cussing at me, I'm going to leave. If you throw things, that's a deal breaker. So you have these very basic lists of, I'm willing to stay in these conditions. I might not even love it, but I'm willing to stay as long as these basics are met. Some people go too far with those. You got to keep it really simple, like your absolute minimums. The second list, and I tell them, do this together. Do this on a date. Describe in detail your ideal relationship. Okay. And oftentimes, couples will write the same thing. And it's like, you're missing the mark. Like, you both want, to be happy and cuddly and romantic, and to be going on dates together, to enjoy hobbies with each other. And so once you paint this picture of, here's the deal breakers, that's usually enough for couples to kind of break some of that deadlock, because it's like, okay, maybe for a wife, it's, I'm not willing to have sex with you if you are watching porn. So husbands can say, hey, how long do you need me to go porn free before I can prove this to you? You want 30 days? I'll go 30 days. You want 3 months? I'll go 3 months. Okay. And so now they have like some clear targets, and men especially like these clear targets, right? This is how men's brains, they want the checkbox, make it simple, make it achievable.
We do, definitely.
And for women, it also helps reel in the emotions. Like we can't allow emotions to be all over the place, demands to, a lot of this intimacy deadlock is like rolling demands. Like, one partner will do this and then they have more demands and then more demands. And it becomes this massive control situation. It becomes very, very unhealthy for both people involved. And so to write those minimums, the deal breakers, and then the ideal gives a couple something to work towards. And then I recommend once a week, check in with those.
Okay.
Is this more comfortable for you? Are we moving towards that ideal? What goal do we want to have next week? We want to hug each other when we pass each other in the hall for a week. Okay, great. Now we have an achievable thing that we can measure and make progress towards.
Very good. Okay. I want to ask you that, like the porn thing. Let's go back to that for a second, because I do know that's a deal breaker in many situations. And I know primarily it's with men who are addicted to it. And I'm sure there's some women, right, that are into it as well. But is there such a thing? Because I think every guy watches it, but I think some guys are really more consumed with it than others. But is there any are there any guys who can really never watch it in their entire lives? Are they really out there? Can they really give it up once they've watched it? I mean, because let me add to that as well. Because even before the internet, before porn, there was Playboy, and there was Pulp Fiction magazines and things like that. So there's always been
VHSs in your uncle's house.
Exactly. There's always been some sort of fantasy of just looking and beautiful women, Marilyn Monroe. I mean, going back to the olden days, or like carvings in a cave or something, right? There's always been this sort of fantasy. Hell, like people raided villages and take the most beautiful women. So there's always been this sort of like endearing, I don't want to say need, but curiosity for guys to look at something beautiful like a centerfold or something like that. Can they honestly give that up? Like go cold turkey and walk away from that completely?
Yeah, so that's an interesting, question. I had a couple conversations on that today. The first thing I'd say, it's important to note that in 1950, only 7% of Americans had ever seen pornography.
Wow. Okay.
And now it's like 98% consume regularly, 98% of men, or whatever the stats are. I've seen them varied, some say lower, but I think it's within a 6-month period. So whatever you consider regularly, weekly is definitely the majority now. So how this has looked over time has definitely changed, and very rapidly. Now, that being said, I think we're in an age where, no, I don't think there is anybody that has straight up never watched in their life. I mean, if it pops up, what are you going to do? You're 15 years old, you see something, you're like, oh, what is this? And so what do we consider? Everyone's seen it. Everyone's been involved. It's become a part of their life, and to some level, I think. As far as walk away, yeah. I mean, I see people do it every day. I get DMs a lot from followers saying they appreciate my content, or they appreciate my message, but they'll say I'm like 1 to 5 to even 10 years completely porn free. And I do get that a lot. And I've seen people in my community, I'll get a text from a former client. I hit 1 year today. I hit 2 years. I hit 3 years. I think one of my oldest clients is pushing on 4 years. So it is possible. It requires change. It requires reframe. But the thing that I wanted to touch on, that I had a conversation with a client today on, is that when we look at what's the problem? He was expressing problems. He's like, I'm tired of this. I feel like I'm never going to get over this. And I said, let's define what this is. What are you trying to get over? And he's like, well, the urges. I'm like, hey, buddy, it's never going to go away. Like, we're not turning you into like some asexual monk here. That's not the goal. The goal is to go from a man who uses his phone to a man who has a healthy relationship with a partner. And that's the transition that we really want to make. And so for single guys, yes, I help them gain that discipline, not to stay in monk mode forever, but to then use that energy to do what they were biologically made for, which is seek out a partner and build something meaningful.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. And again, I think like any vice or any addiction, I think somebody can. I'm just thinking nowadays, it's practically almost impossible not pornography, but anything that could like be a gateway. Because if you go on TikTok, I mean, you just type in like on what is Skittles, or you can type in water on TikTok, anything, and it'll automatically just draw up something like, a model or whatever the case is. IG is like all over the place with it as well. And it's just like, and I feel really bad for young individuals, anyone growing up with this, because it's so readily available. And I can only imagine what it's like for a young person to try to avoid it. But everything from, what's that one Carpenter girl? That one just came out. Her new record album is all over the place right now, going viral, and everyone's kind of saying that's kind of dark and tied to pornography. Stephanie Carpenter, I think is her name. I don't know, but I think it's really hard to avoid it nowadays. And if anybody can and has the willpower to do it, yeah. So that's insane. But I know, and again, for women, like, do you find anything that women are addicted to, or maybe something that's the equivalent to porn that's maybe hurting them in their sexual relationships with their husband?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think this is a huge part of why women are not sleeping with their husbands. I had a call
Okay.
with somebody this week that I had to very sadly inform him that I'm pretty sure his wife is watching porn. He's like, why won't my wife sleep with me? And he tells me some of the symptoms. And I'm like, well, do the sex toys move? And he's like, well, yeah. And I'm like, interesting. Okay. And so I'm like, okay, well, does she talk about intimacy ever? He's like, well, yeah, she wants a couple things that I don't offer her. And I'm like, she's getting these from somewhere. So I think 60% of women now consume pornography regularly. So to say that pornography is not a female thing anymore is completely false. But it is, women have multiple outlets. Men are mostly visual. Women will also do a lot of audio and a lot of books.
Mm-hmm. I have seen that as well. There's like this trend on TikTok where this woman goes to like a bookstore. She goes, do you have that book with that one guy chokes his girl and does this and does that to her and then makes everybody watch? It's all right away. It's like a romantic novel. So I'm like, and I heard this take, this woman, let me try to do my best to kind of get it out of my mouth here, but this one woman said, as detrimental as porn is to guys, romance novels and rom-coms are the equivalent for women. What do you think about that?
And they're getting, I don't participate in this world, but every now and then I get a glimpse inside of it and I'm like, holy crap. Like that is so dark. It is getting so dark, so aggressive, I think is the thing. And so what I see, occasionally I talk to these really good, loving, kind husbands, and they want a happy, healthy relationship, and their wife is the one that's like wanting darker stuff than the man. And he's like, I don't want to do that to you. I mean,
like what example? For example,
like to be totally frank, yeah. I would talk to a husband this week that was like, my wife she's wanting me to hit her and she's wanting me to do pain related stuff. And he's like, I can't do that to her. Like it's against my moral judgment. And I'm like, where is she getting that from? She is getting that from, I mean, it was the same person. I was like, she is getting that from either porn that she's watching or, listening to or books, or this is coming from somewhere.
Yeah. I've actually had a client as well who said she said she was divorcing her husband. And I'm like, why? Because he was too nice and nice in every aspect. And even in the bedroom, she goes, Rudy, I make decisions every day at work. I'm a director. I don't want to come home and make decisions. I want to be dominated, especially in bed. And when I told him to do certain things, like pull my hair, nothing violent, just pulling hair or maybe choking her, like not hard, but just putting his hands around her neck. He's like, oh, I can't do that. Are you okay, babe? I can't do that. I can't do that. He was like too nice. And ultimately, as the years went on, she just said, I needed that in my life. And she divorced him to go find that. And she did, but it was that need or that other side, because at that point they had been married 14 years. And at that point it had gone stale. So like, what are your thoughts on that when somebody's like 14 years, 10 years in and they want to spice it up and their partner's just refusing to do it because they think it's just outside their element?
It is an extremely painful conversation. And I feel the pain when I talk to people in this situation, because again, I've been on both sides of that. And I'm like, I feel that pain. I'm like, what do you realistically do? It's a very hard question. Again, I'd say couples need to increase the intensity of those conversations and just, don't let the resentment build without a lot of conversation. Because I think, if you start soft, but work up. And I think if you sit down and you say, hey, look, I care about you. It's not that I want someone else to satisfy this need, but this to me is getting to the point where it's almost a deal breaker. And I'm sorry. The other thing I'd say is, again, I think there are multiple options. I'd say, some sort of therapy where you can go through, why is this becoming an obsession? Because sometimes there's real reasons behind these needs. And, in that situation, I'd say, maybe that could be remedied by helping her find a healthier way of managing stress. I see that with men a lot. Like maybe you don't actually have this fetish. Maybe there's some need in your life that is getting satisfied with this addiction, that if we can address the root cause of that, you might be able to just heal and not need that anymore. But it's a tough conversation. One of the things that I'd say is, prevention is worth a pound of cure. And what I see a lot right now is that when couples explore sexuality outside of their marriage, they do tend to fetishize one direction or another. And that's why 70% of divorces involve pornography, because someone started seeing something, developed an interest in that, and the other partner was like, hey, this isn't, intimacy is supposed to be a create together thing, not a crowdsourced, I don't know, process.
Is it something they discovered or maybe something they've always been into?
Yeah. And it could be both. Like a foot fetish, most people say they've had a foot fetish since they were kids, since they were really young. And that's okay. That's fine. But again, prevention is worth a pound of cure. Have that conversation beforehand. Have that conversation early on. Be brave enough, because you don't want to be stuck in a relationship that's never going to satisfy you in that way.
Yeah. I want to touch on passion. I had a sex worker on my podcast a few months ago. She's on like a Zoom, like a live platform. I forgot the name of the platform, but she has men call in and she performs, things with toys and things like that. And she's had doctors, lawyers, people like stationed in Iraq. She sees all types of people on the other end of that screen, right? And they're all married. And she asked them, like, what am I giving you that you're coming to me? Like, what is your wife not giving you? And they all say the same thing: passion. I want to feel desired. I know I'm paying you, but you're giving me a feeling that you want me. And I haven't had that feeling of like, you are just incredibly attracted to me ever. And I miss that passion. I miss kissing while having sex while somebody like wants me. And that's why they go to her. And that blew my mind, because, a lot of people would say, well, he's just, he likes thinner women and whatever the case is. Like, that's why he cheated. But a lot of them want to feel loved and that passion. And I think that's incredibly sad. But do you often hear that with your clients? I mean, outside of maybe they're watching pornography because they see that passion and they want that in their relationship. I mean, are you finding that in your conversations with them?
Yeah. And this is an incredibly emotionally triggering conversation for me. Like,
I am so sorry. I did not know that.
No, it's good. I like talking about it, but that is the hardest thing for me to address, because I feel that pain and it's very real. And what do you do? When your partner, and we see this in any aspect of marriage, when your partner refuses to change or refuses to improve in a certain area, I think that now a lot of people get mad at me for this, a lot of women especially, but I think the reality is that completely withholding from your partner is the equivalent of your husband never helping around the house or refusing to get a job. And don't be in a relationship. I'll be honest, don't be in a relationship if you're not going to be intimate with a person who chose you for intimacy. So I do get really mad about that side. On the flip side, when I work with men, I teach them, hey, you don't, as the leader, if you want to be the leader in the relationship, as the leader, you can't just demand something that you haven't worked for. And unfortunately, we all have the biological need to feel validated, to feel like someone's in love with us, to feel like someone's passionate about us physically. And unfortunately, a lot of people haven't earned that. And so, I think for guys, I would say I often coach them like, hey, work on becoming the version of yourself that your wife would be attracted to. Because I see these, you see these TikToks, right? I think, what was the guy, the country singer, last name Green? He had this really popular music video. Women were drooling over in TikToks. I don't know. He was just recently popular, like mustache cowboy music video. And I saw probably 100 TikTok videos of people like women just drooling over this. And husbands were like, my wife likes this man. I'm like, dude, your wife probably has a type, and I say that to guys all the time. I'm like, if your wife, is reading these fantasy romance books, it's because she, in her mind, has a type. She thinks that would be hot. So be that Italian dude with an unbuttoned shirt on the beach, and you have a much higher chance. And now some people will say, oh, that's a really tall order. I'm not that. What would you want from your wife? You want your
Yeah.
wife to be sexy and attractive and super passionate and super into you. Are you the same way? Or are you just saying, hey, can we have sex tonight? And she's shutting you down.
Very good point. Very good point. I love that. Do you find like clients, that whole conversation, are you finding that some of your clients, I'm assuming are male, majority are male, are having a tough time accepting the fact that their wives are attracted to like a guy like that on TikTok or anything like on social media? Like if they have a type and that there's a complete contrast to what they look like, are you finding that most people have a tough time accepting that?
Have that conversation often. That's not one that's come up, but
Okay.
I do know enough men that I've worked with that, men have insecurities too. They have
Yeah.
deep insecurities. And a lot of times men feel like they could never measure up to a certain type. And they feel like, oh, well, I'm just not that guy. I'm just not in shape. I'm just not, I'm just not that way. Or that's not how I do things. Or they got rejected by their wife one time when she literally had the flu. And then they feel like, oh, I'm never going all out again. I'm never going to do it again. And I think what's sad is porn has made it so easy for people to just give up and not even try. And so they're like, okay, if my wife's not available, I'll just use porn. So why would a husband plan romantic dinners? Why would he put in the effort? Like 150 years ago, when you might have, if you had porn, it was like literally one picture this big on like, a hand sketch drawing or something. They didn't have magazines. They didn't have videos. Or you had to go somewhere and you'd, be outcasted from the community if you were caught dead doing that. And so in that kind of environment, it was harder. So what did you do? You had to work for sex. And so if we look at kind of some of the big root causes behind marriage issues and intimacy issues, women will be supported and they will be okay without their husbands. They don't feel the need to show up in their relationship because there's no wolves, there's no bears, there's no, at worst case scenario, the government will pay for you, but you'll probably also get child support and alimony. So you're good to go. You can get a job. And then husbands don't feel like they have to work for sex. They don't have to win women over as hard. You don't have to work in your marriage as much because just turn to porn. So I'm seeing that's kind of causing that intimacy deadlock where there's just a lot of laziness. They're like, fine, I'll get my needs met somewhere else. I don't care. I don't need you.
Very good point. Yeah. It can also be complacency as well, because I have had conversations with those guys, well, and their wives as they're filing for divorce, like where they were the providers. And again, they gave them a wonderful life, but they felt that's all they needed to do. Like they provided, but they didn't contribute in the house. And they didn't make any efforts, like you were saying, like making her feel special or taking her out for dinner. It was let's like, come here, do this, and let's go ahead and get it done. And that guys have to understand that that's not the way to work. So, I mean, maybe for some transactional relationships, maybe, but that's not how it works. That you have to put in effort. And I love that you're saying that you have to play the role or adjust to the role that maybe she's attracted to. Because I think women need to understand that you don't have to look like an IG model to turn on a guy. Because one thing I love about my wife now is that she introduced me to burlesque shows. We go to burlesque shows, and some of the performers up there, they're not, trim women. They're curvy. They're shapely. And it's the aura, it's the confidence, it's like the smile, how they think they're beautiful. And I think a lot of women need to understand that if you carry yourself that way, then you think you're gorgeous, we'll see it that way. And I think that's a huge item that a lot of people need to understand. But at the same token, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, yeah. Again, I've talked to wives who are so insecure, painfully insecure. They don't want to have sex because they're stretch marks and they don't feel pretty anymore. And I'll talk to the husband. He's like, my wife is gorgeous. Like, I only want her. I don't want to look at anyone else, but I have these urges, the physical urges. Yeah, super interesting.
Yeah. Have you had any conversations with clients that are at that point where both of them are maybe at an impasse and are exploring open marriages? Because I know that's a big thing right now that a lot of people are considering.
Yeah. To me, that's such a sad place to be, and maybe if that's what a person wants, I'm not going to judge them for it. But personally speaking, I'm like, I understand there's reasons why people stay. I just feel like it seems like you're just spreading your attention more thin. Like, it's kind of
Yeah.
like trying to run two businesses at the same time. And as an entrepreneur, that's not very successful. So it's like, is that really going to give you full satisfaction in one place? Are you able to dedicate your time and attention to somewhere? I think it's just a product of this pain that people feel that they're not getting fulfilled. Because I think even people who I don't know the percentage, but I wonder how many people who are pursuing an open relationship wouldn't be really happy if they felt fully satisfied by one person, or if they just haven't experienced that.
Very good point. Yeah. Because I know of a few that have tried it and ultimately it failed. It didn't work out.
I have not known someone that it did work out for either.
Yeah, I just couldn't do that. No way. But believe it or not, I have a high school friend of mine. He's still a good friend. Him and his wife have been swingers for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And they are probably the happiest couple I've ever known. It works for them. So again, sometimes it works for some, sometimes it doesn't work for others. But I asked him, like, why does it work for you? And like others have failed, because they've seen couples go into these buildings and have a divorce, a big fight. The husband starts crying because it's not what he wanted. And he said more, and I think you can relate to this, like, and me too, like, your relationship has to be strong. You have to love each other. There has to be complete trust, open communication. And when you have that, you trust them in this space. You know, they're not going to cross any boundaries or rules. And I'm like, really? So that's really the fundamental core of every relationship, is just communication, trusting, and knowing what the other person wants.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, when I joke about the sexual prenup, that's what I mean. Is be in agreement on what you want. And I think that's the key there that I was going to say earlier is it's not, what I'm finding is it's not so much what rules you have, what morals you have regarding sex, what fetishes you have, what you want to do, as much as it is do it together and be a loving partner. And I will say, I know men who watch porn who are loving partners, and I know men who watch porn that are horrible partners. And there is a really big difference. And so for some people, they allow it to consume them because they go into these cycles of guilt and shame. Their partner's angry about it because they didn't sign up for this. They wanted something different. And now we have communication issues and, jealousy issues, whereas all of that could be avoided by... Yeah. And so I think if a couple was happy and they mutually felt good about something, great. Communicate along the way. And if anyone changes their mind, have a game plan beforehand. If one of us changes our mind, are we going to separate or are we going to go back to the way things used to be? Have that plan.
I love that idea. Have you made any videos or content regarding that sexual prenup?
I made one on TikTok, and yeah, it's interesting comment section.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. I mean, as I get older, I understand it's not really the amount of times you have sex. It's really the quality when you do have it. Because sometimes, your schedules may be off, whatever the case is. So you don't necessarily have to do it, 4 or 5 times a week or a month, whatever the case is. But it's more you want, when you do it, to be the best that it can be. And I think having that agreement early on, I think that'd be a wonderful thing. Maybe you can just do like an annual review like you do at work. Like, hey, how are we doing? Okay, do we want to adjust this like frequency per month? Or what about threesomes, honey? What do you think about that? That seems to be another thing that a lot of people are fighting for divorce on. He asked me for a threesome and I'm not into that. Are you hearing a lot of clients ask for that as well? And how the wife's reacting or husband's reacting?
And, not with me, because typically it's men coming to me, like my clients are always men coming to me saying that they personally want to overcome porn addiction. They feel like it's consuming their life. They don't want it in their life anymore. They don't want the habit anymore. But yeah, I can only imagine I mean, I know people personally that have been in that situation where they're like, hey, he wants to be a polygamist. I'm not going that route. And again, I think at that point, kind of like with what you do with breakup and divorce coaching, at that point, you just have to say, okay, we're no longer compatible. I have to let this go and just recognize that those change in values, in one of the biggest things I've been thinking about lately is how in our this new world that we're in, this digital age where men and women are mostly equals, we have equal opportunities in terms of money and growth and finances. Men and women can successfully, it's not ideal, but they can successfully raise children on their own. They can survive on their own. They don't need each other like we used to. We have to change the rules of the game. And I don't think we've caught up as a society to that, where we have to have this new rule of, okay, we have to address the fact that sexuality is like an everyday thing for what I mean by that is either it's going to come up in the form of porn or someone in your DMs or, it's just like we're consumed, like surrounded by opportunities and temptations and triggers and, all that. We have to accept that and we have to adjust. And so women went through this phase of, mostly religious backgrounds saying, hey, it's your duty as a wife to sleep with your husband every day. And then the feminist movement came along and they were like, well, it's not really your duty. We're all equals. And now it's like, hey, if you want a relationship with a man, it actually is. Whether or not you're religious, this is still a thing. So we're taking religion out, like the religious pressure out of the picture, but we haven't really reinserted. This is still necessary if you want a romantic relationship with a person.
Yeah. And you're right. I think it's getting worse. We're getting further away from what you were talking about, that core need of just not having less distractions and just remembering, just it's us two, you and I, right? And have you seen like the recent trends? Like I've seen a lot of guys in the incel community celebrating the advancement in those dolls. And like, I mean, have you seen that? And there's also like a lot of AI is getting ridiculous. And AI is now you can build somebody who looks more or less close to lifelike, and that's your relationship. I've heard people have relationships with ChatGPT. They talk to it every day. So it's like people are connecting more electronically to nothing, but they're having the fulfillment of a relationship. So I think it's getting a whole lot worse now.
What's crazy is it's like we doubled the number of households through ChatGPT. Like instead of 8 billion people, now we're creating 16 billion people because 8 billion wasn't enough for us to find a person. But I think a lot of that came from, I'm going to call it for what it is. I think it's laziness. It's the laziness of, I don't feel like, because I work with a lot of men where I'm pushing them into dating. I'm like, you are old enough, like you're in your 30s, you have like, you're watching porn, but did you realize that, evolution or God created this person that you're supposed to be with, you don't have to keep turning to porn. You can find a person. And a lot of people have been burned by, my parents got divorced, my friends got divorced, and this rhetoric, it's horrible on TikTok. Like, I don't, my number one comment is, but porn won't take my house.
Oh my God.
But porn won't take my house. That's everybody's reason for watching porn at this point.
So that validates what they're doing, not touching a flesh and blood woman.
But they're not happy. And I don't know. We'll have to wait and see with the research. But I doubt that 5 years of a relationship with a robot that can't appreciate the sunset with you, that can't walk on the beach with you, that can't pick you up and spin you around the room, I don't think we know the power of physical touch by a human to calm the nervous system, to stimulate the brain, to bring us joy, peace, and happiness. And I think it's going to shorten lifespans and
oh my God,
lead to more medications.
You're probably right. And the long-term effects, because we're in the infancy of AI. So who knows what's going to be 50 years from now. I mean, what is that going to look like? Man, that actually depresses me just saying that out loud.
I've heard it said that however you want to view evolution, creation, not going into that conversation, but like we are not biologically prepared. We're not biologically prepared to handle what's happening now with technology. Like we have not evolved to this point. Our brains, we're introducing quantum computers and how much faster technology is spinning than our nervous systems can handle. Like we have not evolved for the amount of change that's happened in the last 100 years.
You're right about the guys on social media, because every now and then I get people like, I'm single for life. Why bother? I'm like, why don't you want to be with a person? Too much drama. I'm like, well, life is drama, man. Things happen in life. That's what makes life so worthwhile. If it was just stagnant and boring, I mean, who wants a life like that? And he goes, no, I'd rather be alone. I've always got porn. I'm like, porn. And I mean, you can't celebrate your big promotion or big, wonderful events with porn. Who are you going to call when you have great news, or who's going to hold your hand when you're in the emergency room when you found you had a diagnosis of something life threatening? You need that human. We're humans. We're built that way. We crave companionship. Nah, I don't need that. So it's like people think just the most small inconvenience in life is drama, and they don't want to fight for it. They don't want to deal with that, which blows my mind. That people would have, men and women, I've seen they all are giving up on that, it's scary.
Yeah. Well, and that's where I come back to the laziness. Like to assume that out of 8 billion people, there are no humans on this planet that you can have a healthy relationship with, I think is just, and I talk to single guys literally every single day that tell me, I don't think I'll find anyone. I'm like what? How many people are in this country? Like over 330 million. And you don't think there's one that could be a healthy, compatible relationship? And yes, there's challenges. There's a lot of challenges in dating. We don't have the structure or the, cultural frameworks that we used to, but I don't think it's not possible. A lot of people just, dating forces people to look in the mirror, and it forces them to change themselves. And that's painful, and they don't want to. They'd rather just not, but.
Yeah. And what you said earlier, I'll piggyback off that. I think a lot of the times it's the rhetoric you see on social media, like stay single, guys, don't date. Women ain't shit. Women ain't worth a damn. You have to be 6 foot. You have to have
women
all
are
this
saying
bullshit.
the same thing, though, to be fair.
Yeah, 100%.
It's just as toxic.
There's the misogyny and the misandry. There's those platforms are always in the millions, and they're always heavy with the engagement. And it just blows my mind, because if you enter those type of conversations, you know how it is. You're going to end up in a silo. You're all going to be in an echo chamber just saying the same rhetoric, and yet you have a community. You have a group of people that actually believe what you're talking about, but you're just, it's a loneliness. It's loneliness. And there's guys like the MGTOW group who have given up on women are giving up on men, but that's just not who we are. And it is depressing at times to see, because there's so many young people who've given up, and it shouldn't be that way. It's sad sometimes. I'm rambling here. I'm sorry. I wanted to ask you this. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I think that, if a person truly is happy single, and I see this a lot, couples that say that they are truly happy being single, or individual, like not having kids, or single people who are like, I just want to live the single life. That's fine if you're truly happy with it. What I encourage people to do, to look inward and decide, is if you feel that craving for a partner, honor that in your body, honor those cravings, and put in the work that it's going to take to get you there. It's not for everybody, and that's okay. But if you do find yourself wishing you had a person, and what's one of the symptoms of that? Well, laying in bed at night, trying to reach out to some e-girl and chat with her because you want pillow talk with somebody who, if you feel that craving for a person, then honor it and put in effort.
You mentioned guys reach out to you because they've had a breaking point. What does that look like normally for a guy to know, become self-aware, I have a problem and I need help? What does that look like?
Yeah, oftentimes it's triggered by something like a divorce or a breakup, where they realize I ruined this situation. Sometimes they lose their job over it. Sometimes it's just, they're just tired of the guilt and shame cycle. Maybe they've realized, okay, I could really level up here if this wasn't consuming me. And a lot of times they're at the point of, what I say is, and this is, I don't say this often, but I'm okay saying it here on this podcast. Are there people that can watch porn in a healthy way? I think there actually are. But I will say that population is very small, and the difference is why you're watching. If you're watching for a healthy reason and it's very moderated and disciplined, okay, I'm not going to argue. But if you're watching it because you're stressed, because you're in pain, because you're avoiding emotions. If you're using it like a drug, your brain, has those same negative effects. You are hurting yourself. You're reinforcing negative habits. And so I think a lot of guys see that. And so it's not that everyone needs to be at that point. It's just that some guys realize, hey, the way that I'm using this is clearly toxic. I'm clearly obsessing. I clearly can't focus. It's wearing me down and I need to change.
I have never thought about it. Again, I'm thinking, this is how I'm thinking. You go to porn when you're horny. I never thought about I'm stressed and I'm going to that. I've never thought of it that way. I mean, I thought about like a beer or going to the gym, working out. I've never thought of it that way. That's wow.
And
that would explain the addiction. Yeah.
Exactly. Using it like a drug. And so the people that I typically speak to, they have developed this habit since they were, they'll start watching from 5 to 10 at some point, and by their teens, they started using it to cope with parents, cope with school, cope with bullies, cope with breakups, moved into college to cope with exams, to cope with work stress, to cope with marriage issues. A lot of guys I had a fight with my wife, so to cool off, I went and watched porn. Well, hey, man, maybe you need to sit down and journal, figure out why you had a problem, figure out what you can do to resolve it with your wife. But what happens is when you turn to porn for your stress, for your problems, you reinforce the behavior that created the problem. You give yourself dopamine for creating that problem. So procrastination is a really big one. A lot of guys will relapse like, oh, I'm so stressed. I procrastinate. I have so much to do. You just rewarded your brain for procrastination. You're more likely, chemically and physically, more likely to procrastinate because your brain knows that is going to lead to the reward.
Wow. Wow. I just, again, the stress part is like really blowing my mind right now. I just never thought of it that way.
Right.
It's insane. And again, it's so readily available. Like I think I will always appreciate me being 48 and growing up in the time that I did, because it wasn't just grabbing your phone and looking at it. I mean, you had to go through lengths to try to get it. That one cousin had a video, and Playboys were always behind the counter at the gas register. You couldn't get to them, so you couldn't see it. It was held away from you until you were 18 or whatever the case is. So I can only imagine what it's doing to everybody here. But anybody who's young with an iPad. And again, I read a study somewhere that young men in their 20s are now having ED because they've grown up with it. And now when a flesh and blood woman's in front of them, they don't know what to do. It's not the same. So again, I mean, you're doing a wonderful service to these gentlemen. And where can people find you? Yeah,
so you can find me, on TikTok, Instagram, even YouTube, and my organization is Fight the Beast. So on most of those, I think I'm fightthebeast.org as my tag there. And I have a free 3-day program that helps men who are seeking to break the cycle to just kind of have a framework for what does this process look like? Why should you start this process? And kind of give you that launch pad.
Awesome. Well, again, Heather, thank you for doing this. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.